So I have here three versions of the Waterborne surf adapter. I have the original with traditional kingpin or TKP trucks. Then here's the original with reverse kingpin or RKP trucks. And then we have their latest edition, which is the Dream adapter. And I'll be using all three of these to talk about this Dream adapter. So let's start by talking about the difference between TKP trucks and RKP trucks. So as you can see here, traditional kingpin trucks have your kingpin placed on the opposite side of the hanger as your pivot point. And RKP trucks, or reverse kingpin trucks, have your kingpin and the pivot point on the same side of the hanger. Another difference you'll notice is that TKPs are lower to the ground and RKPs are higher. So traditional kingpin trucks or TKPs are what you see on skateboards, and RKPs or reverse kingpin trucks are what you see on longboards. And the difference between them is that TKPs give you tighter, more nimble turns, and RKPs give you a wider turning radius, and it's kind of a looser, flowier feel on those turns. And the difference between how these two feel on a Waterborne surf adapter is actually pretty substantial. And which one I prefer really just comes down to the wheelbase of the deck I'm using for me. So what the Waterborne Dream adapter is the surf adapter with a reverse kingpin truck integrated right into the adapter. So it gives you a more elegant design. So the only real difference between these, aside from the obvious visual difference, is that the Dream adapter actually offsets your wheelbase by 3/4 of an inch relative to just using the surf adapter with regular RKP trucks. But in terms of feel, these feel very similar, if not identical, and so that wheelbase offset is really kind of your only consideration when comparing these two. And what you'll see on Waterborne Completes is the new Dream adapter. And they do that for a reason, and that's because with RKPs on the surf adapter, you don't have any chance of wheelbite. But the question for me is, what feels better between the Waterborne surf adapter with RKPs versus with TKPs? And as I said, that for me really just comes down to the deck and the wheelbase I'm using. And personally, I actually prefer the Waterborne with TKPs on shorter decks, but with the Waterborne with TKPs, you most definitely get wheelbite, probably even with as small as 60mm wheels. So that is the major concern with using the Waterborne surf adapter with TKPs. So if you're going to use the surf adapter with TKPs, then you have to have a way to compensate for wheelbite. And there's a number of ways that you can accomplish that. Adding riser pads is probably the most common and easy thing to do. You can go with smaller wheels, or if you get really ambitious, you can even carve wheel wells in your deck, but a lot of people don't like to do that. But however you do it, that's the major concern. But as I said, if it were me using the Waterborne surf adapter on a short deck, I'm using TKP trucks, and I'm going to figure out how to deal with that wheelbite because I much prefer this on the shorter decks. The highest and best use for this Dream adapter that I found is on these massive decks that you see behind me here. So my rule of thumb, which really just comes down to experimentation with all these decks, is that for me, if I'm on a wheelbase shorter than 41 inches, then I want to use the Waterborne with TKPs. And if I'm on a wheelbase of wider than 41 inches, then I want to use the Dream adapter with RKPs. And that number is totally random. It really just is based on these decks. That's based on this Sector 9 loop nose walker that I use here. That has a 41-inch wheelbase, and for me, I much prefer TKPs on that. And the reason being is because it's a lot more nimble. So even on a 57-inch deck with the Waterborne with TKPs, I can be extremely, shockingly nimble with this thing. So you've seen that zigzag section on my college campus, for example. On the Waterborne with TKPs on this 57-inch deck, navigating that is no problem at all. However, if I were to put RKPs on this same deck, I would not be able to navigate that section because I wouldn't be able to get those tight of turns. But if I'm using a deck that's longer than that and has a wider wheelbase than that, like these massive ones here, then I'm going to go with that Dream adapter with RKPs. So you probably saw me put together this Handboards Classic that has the Dream adapter on it. Works really, really well for this. You've probably seen me put together this Kahuna Creations Bombora deck with the Dream adapter. And then I've got this Handboards Pinger that's going to get a Dream adapter on it. I've got this White Wave massive one. I've actually already had a Waterborne with RKPs on it, but I'm going to put a Dream adapter on this one as well. This 60-inch Birch Logger will get a Dream adapter on it. And then this Coastal Drifter, you probably saw me put it together with the Aquilo truck. And after making that video, I actually went and tried this with the Waterborne with RKPs and actually preferred that over the Aquilo. And again, that is because This is one of those really long ones that has a really wide wheelbase. So for those massive ones, I'm always going to use that Dream adapter with the RKP. But if it's shorter than about 57 inches and a wheelbase narrower than about 41 inches, then I prefer TKPs. So let's just look at this up close and see how it's built. So the first thing to notice is that you have a major advantage in that you do not have to attach your truck to the surf adapter. So that saves you a big step there. You'll also notice that this comes with pre-threaded bolt holes, so you don't have to have nuts on the other side. You can just bolt the surf adapter directly onto your deck without needing nuts. And then the final thing to note about it is that it does come with the fin system included. So you can watch my review on that to see what this does, but essentially this gives you 3 modes of operation that changes the angle on this. And again, watch my video to see how to put this together. I'm not going to do that for you here, but these pieces will go into here and change the angle. So when you have it just like this without the fin pieces, this is standard mode. If you put it on mega pump mode, that's going to lift this base plate here. So that's going to widen the angle here and makes it so you can get more forward momentum with your pumping. If you put it on super carve mode, that's going to narrow the space between here, and that'll make for more nimble carving there. So that gives you a lot of customization options with that fin system as well. So as far as how this feels and performs, I really don't have much to say about it other than I just love it on these longboards. And it is hands down my preference on these longboards. So if you're terrified of Wheelbite, then you probably want to stick with the RKPs. As I said, I don't prefer it on short decks. I prefer TKPs on short decks. But as always, you just have to worry about the Wheelbite with that. And obviously, if you're going to go with a Waterborne with RKPs, then you want to get the Integrated DREAM system because it just looks a lot more elegant. And I say that I wouldn't like to use these on the short decks, but I'm just stating that as a personal preference because it still works fantastic and feels good, and you might like it, you might even prefer it. That's just a personal preference. But that's the only real drawback on it for me, is that it just limits the applications when I prefer to use TKPs. The Dream adapter feels very smooth and fluid in its rail-to-rail motion. It has really great forward momentum. In fact, this has the most forward momentum out of any Surfskate truck you'll find with the RKPs on it. And that's a big reason why I love it on these longboards, is it just makes these a lot easier to get going and keep moving once you get them going. So I love the Dream adapter. It's definitely found a really important place in my quiver with all these longboard decks. Works fantastic on the short decks as well. Highly recommend the Dream adapter. And with all that said, now I'm going to install this on this Handboards Pinger, but that's for the next video, and we'll see you on that video.